Hi and welcome back to the BrainFit Show. This is the show where we talk about all things brain fitness, address some of the biggest myths surrounding the human brain, and help you in your quest to build the best learning brain. So joining me once again, Ian, are my co-host Ellie and
Hi, Ian.
BrainFit's founder and director Cheryl.
Hello, Ellie. Hello, Ian. Hello, Cheryl.
So the number one query that we get from parents coming into BrainFit is always, my child cannot focus. What can I do? What can I do?
Out of 10 parents, we get 8
Eight,
parents
right? Yeah,
complaining
8.
about that.
A lot of parents come in with this question. So even sometimes when their cognitive profile shows that, they have no problems doing the attentional games, it's still a very common complaint. So maybe let's talk a bit about this today, right? So I think just to have a little backdrop of the issues we'll be talking about today, let's frame it using the 5 brain pillars.
Yeah, I think to understand, I always feel like, addressing attentional issues is a complex concept of paying attention in the brain, just because so many parts are involved, right?
Yeah, but first I think we need to understand the components that make up the brain. So you have the 5 components. You have your visual, auditory, emotions, you have your movement, and your focus, of course. Yeah.
So each of these component, right? So imagine, I think the way to help our audience think about the brain is like they are muscles located in different parts of the brain. Okay, so you can think of that. Of course, brain cells are not muscle cells, but I think behaviorally, the brain behaves like muscles, right? So there's weak muscles and stronger muscles, hence the word fitness kind of differences. So one part of the brain that's responsible for movement. So how would a child who is not having optimized sensory motor skills affect focus? I think if I am fidgeting in my chair, right, we're exhausting brain energy. So I think the one important concept the audience should have is that the brain is an energy finite organ. That means at any one moment, we only have X amount of brain power to spare. So if I'm spending X amount trying to sit still, because I want to fidget, right, but I'm trying to sit still, or if I'm leaning, those kids who are leaning and they're exhausting brain energy, just keeping the body anchored to the seat, I think that shortens the attention span.
Yeah, I think under movement as well, we talk about the vestibular system, which is our balancing system. So in the classroom, they're constantly, taking things out from their bags, or they're looking up and down from the whiteboard. There's a lot of movement there. And that's where, if they have very weak vestibular system, they might get easily very dizzy and disoriented, and they won't even be able to focus on what's in front of them, what teacher is talking about.
Right. Yeah. So you mentioned the brain is like, it's got a finite amount of power. So it's like, example, and then across these 5 brain pillars, I think it's all 5 are always active at one point in time. So it's not like some is 0 at one point, the others are like 100, right?
Yeah.
It's always evenly, well, not evenly, but
all the parts are engaged.
All the parts are engaged, correct. So like you mentioned, if your movement, let's say, is taking up 30%, your attention maybe drops to 5%, and then that's when we'll see.
Yeah, and if we're comparing each other, so if my movement is taking up 30%, but yours only taking up 5%, say you're a sports guy, and you're gonna end off, even if we're equally intelligent, you end off with more attention span than me. I will zone out first because I just get tired.
Right.
And it's not just, we talk about the vestibular system. Now that's getting deep into the sensory system. What about kids who are just sensitive at the skin level, the tactile sense? Clothes tags? Or if you have a texture, a new piece of clothing that's not softened up yet, and the kids are just kind of, or an adult. I don't like laces. I have a sensory, sensitivity tactilely. So certain textures I totally try to avoid. So imagine if you have something like that on your body the whole day. How are you going to focus? You can't. It's just exhausting the focus system.
Okay, so next, let's talk about the visual system. So the visual system is just whatever comes in through your eyes. So this can also cause a lot of distraction. Maybe some examples.
I think more specifically what the visual skill is the brain's ability to perceive things that they see accurately. So for example, you may be seeing straight lines, but another person who doesn't have that strong visual perception skills may be seeing like
diverging lines, right?
Yeah. So
And this is so true, I want to tell you an example. I ever sat with a child, this is real, right? I actually wrote the small letter B and the small letter D large on just one plain sheet of paper. And I asked him, are these the same? And he said yes. reversal problem. Very common, right? So, when you talk about lines accuracy, so for this child, the B bubble, one to the left and one to the right, to the child, there was no difference. And I asked again, are you sure it's the same? And he said, yes. So a child who is perceiving what we expect, I no longer assume that whatever I see is the same as whatever anybody else will see, because it might be different. They are clearly different letters, but for that child, the perception is the same. I mean, that's exhausting, right? Because you're constantly told you're not reading the word right, or you have to recheck, it doesn't make sense. So that is very taxing on the attention system. If you don't have precision and clarity in your signals.
Right.
In your
I think a
visual
lot of
signals.
parents are also concerned, right? At what point in a kid's life is it a problem, or whether they should consult a professional in terms of getting it diagnosed in terms of the reversals?
So I think at the point of diagnosis, we need a bit of clarification. I feel like there's a bit of a myth out there that we have 3 types of brain, right? Primarily the normal brain, and then you have a gifted brain, and then you have a brain that's learning disabled. So while diagnostic points are very clear-cut, right? There are statistical man-made points. I think one clarification that's important for the audience is that the brain at the biological level is not so clear-cut. Like, let's use dyslexia, right? We're talking about reversals, difficulties with reading. So a child may not fall into the diagnostic criteria of having dyslexia, but that child hardly likes to read. Right? At the same time, we're talking about attention today. We can use the example as well. A child may not be in the diagnostic criteria of ADD, but the child can hardly pay attention, right? And likewise, on the other end of the spectrum, somebody who's very smart but may not fall in the criteria of being gifted. So we have that haziness, right? And I think that it's important to know that even without a diagnosis, you may have a suboptimized system. That's what I'm saying, right? So for us, I think our cognitive profiling certainly is more important and valuable for us to see where are these gaps, isn't it? And then we can try and build them up.
Correct, because it's not just like one linear line, right? Where it's like you have a fixed point where it's like, oh, if I'm here, I'm attention deficit, and I'm here, oh, I'm okay. So there's no like fixed line to tell you
Not
these
at the
kind of things.
biology level,
Exactly,
right?
yeah,
I mean, we
yeah.
have diagnostic points, but at the real life, as we see in children, right? And again, you could have an attention weakness, but you are such a great artist, right? And then so this concept of there's strengths and there's weaknesses that make everybody so unique, right? And in the example, we better come back to the example of visual, right? I mean, the other point we have is a common problem that we have, eye tracking. Kids who do not eye track well, the manifestation of callousness, right?
So even when we talk about eye tracking, it's important for reading, to develop good reading skills, because eye tracking is really about being able to smoothly track your eyes from left to right? Whereas some younger children or even older kids, they are unable to smoothly track
So
their
they might like
eyes.
skip sentences.
So they will skip words in between, and that will in turn affect their comprehension of what they're reading.
Yeah, but I think what's really important, right, is that the behavior. So let's say you are skipping words. You are making careless errors. So as an adult, as a parent, you know what I think? I think you're not paying attention. You're not trying your best. Again, we come back to this whole thing, right? Hey, why are you so careless? You are not focusing. But the issue is not a focus issue here, which is why I think we need to talk about the brain pillars, right? Because the behavior, the manifestation is that you are really not paying attention. Ellie, why are you skipping words, making all these careless errors, right? You should know this better. But you don't know that you are skipping words. You just know that you are reading word for word, thinking that you're online, but you're not. So I think that's when we need to understand that there are skills, or maybe a lack of skills, that sometimes may not be as obvious.
Okay. So we have talked about the movement brain so far and the visual brain. So let's move on to the auditory side of things. So as the name implies, it's what you hear, the inputs that your ears are taking in.
And how the brain perceives it.
Yes, correct. And how the brain perceives it, right? So you might hear meow, but the fact that it's a cat saying meow is your auditory system kicking in, amongst other things.
Yeah.
So what are some ways this might go wrong?
I mean, there's lots of ways this can go wrong, right? The arguments, the teacher says that I'm supposed to bring back the homework on Tuesday. And the teacher said, I said Thursday. But you said Tuesday. But you said Thursday. Arguments even among couples, among people, because you have gotten the wrong message, right? And we know that, for the auditory system, speed is so important. For example, b and the. I'm going really deep in here, guys. Do we want to go deep?
Sure.
like bag, all right, or bad and dad. Okay, real words. Bad and dad. What separates bad and dad? B and D again. But at the auditory level, at the sound level, the difference between a p and a d, it's a 40 millisecond difference. Okay, so if you are not able to process the first 40 milliseconds of the onset of the sound accurately, to you, bad and dad has no difference. Right now, how does that then exhaust attention? It exhausts attention because then your sentences don't make sense. And I will ask, Ian, can you repeat what you just said? So as I'm repeating, I'm reprocessing, right? Whereas for another child, the child has no processing weakness. They're already on to the next paragraph of what you're saying. But now I'm rechecking again. Why? What did you say? It doesn't make sense. So of course that's going to be exhausting for the attention system. And not to mention, it also make the child behaves like they're not focusing. Right? Although it's an attention issue, like when you have a Thursday, Tuesday argument that's going on, the first thought for the parent would be that you're not paying attention in class. The teacher obviously said Thursday, but you think Tuesday. What is wrong with you? Nothing wrong. It's just
So I have a question,
auditory.
right? So does this mean that your auditory skills are stronger or weaker if you have to read aloud what you're saying to if you are talking about memorization? So if you're reading it out aloud to yourself, does that mean your auditory skills are weaker or stronger?
I think it's reinforcing. Some kids do that, right? And we do that actually as an exercise. It's a good exercise, but some kids actually have to do that. Like if they don't read aloud, they're not able to comprehend. Then I think that's a bit of an issue because you need to be able to silent read, right? And comprehend. But some kids can't do that. So they're actually vocalizing to reinforce the auditory signals, I believe, right? Rather than, because if you're silently reading, you're still making those auditory signals, but in your brain. So for a child, I would think it's weak, right? That I have to now vocalize to reinforce that sound for the messaging to be clear in the brain.
I think it's also the level of engagement. So when you're reading that text, I think that's because of your weaker focus as well, right? So you have to reinforce by reading it aloud. Yeah.
It's like activating more systems to help you, right? Yeah.
Emotions?
Let's talk about emotions first, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, come on. We all know how emotions can affect focus.
Example, you're angry at school, cannot focus. While you're hungry, okay, I cannot focus. Your
Argument with your
girlfriend,
cannot
yeah,
focus at
okay,
work.
I got the first question on my test wrong. How am I going to do for the rest? Yeah, so many ways this can go wrong, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, right? I mean, I think that's easy to understand when we are emotionally not at the right place. Just when we don't have enough sleep, we're cranky. The whole day goes off. You know, you can't really focus and be very productive, right? So that can affect as well.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to emotions, a lot of the messaging in the kid's brain comes from the external environment. So parents' expectations, how the teacher in school even communicates their successes or their praises.
Yeah. Or their displeasure, right? Or frustration with the child. All that voice, right? The inner voice. We should have another talk on that, right? On
In
the
a future
inner,
episode.
Yeah, in a future episode, yeah. So that's 4 pillars, right?
That's 4,
Movement,
yep.
visual, auditory, focus.
No,
Emotions. Now the last one is the focus
Focus,
system.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because all these other systems could be fit. Right? So let's say I have no sensory motor weakness. My visual is great. My auditory is great. My emotion is very healthy. But then I still can't focus. That could be the case too, right? Yeah. So where focus itself is a problem. So I think why there is so many instances of presentations of inattentive behaviors is precisely because of that. So many individual systems can contribute to that behavior, right? And then that system itself could also be weak, right? Which is why you often have complaints that inattention is the issue, but then sometimes it may not be, but at other times it may very well be.
So I guess to sum up what you just mentioned, so I think I'm not sure if you mentioned it just now, but the brain sort of works like an orchestra where you've got the different instrument players, i.e. your movement, visual, auditory, emotional brain, all performing their own different roles, and then
Yet
it's
working in sync.
Working in sync, correct? Because one instrument doesn't sound nice without another, right? And then you've got focus, which is the overall conductor trying to sync all of it together. So if even one part is down, the system might
The
collapse.
music is bad.
Correct, the music
and
is
of
bad.
course, you could also have the individual instruments are pretty good, but then the conductor is off.
Exactly.
Right, so
exactly.
everything goes out of sync. And that's why we also name the focus system the executive function, isn't it? Like the CEO. I mean, why do we use executive? It's kind of like the in charge. So I think that's a very, very good example. The conductor, is really that key man responsible with all this incoming and outgoing signals in the brain. But that conductor itself may have a weakness as well.
Right. So since focus is the conductor, maybe instead of talking, because I'm not sure we have time to talk about strategies for everything, let's just deal with some focus strategies. So what are some...
But before you go into that, I think one question will be, how do I know? Okay, great. Now that you have described all these things, I'm seeing this inattentive behavior in my child. So I'm thinking from an audience perspective. So how am I supposed to know what's going on?
Through our comment.
Yeah, very good standardized testing.
Yeah.
So that would be one way, right? And so we have a cognitive map assessment that kind of drills down into each of this system. So, but I think apart from that, and that would be another episode, I guess. Right? Apart from that, I guess really clear observations. To think of the child, I think would be useful around these 5 pillars. So I'm looking at movement. Oh, does he like sports? Is he happy at the playground? I'm looking at his visual skills. How is he in his drawing, his art, some of these visual related things, and auditory would be how is he in his communication, to have some clues, I guess, for parents, right? But yeah, I mean, I guess a test, an assessment, a formal assessment would be the best with the greatest clarity.
Okay, so let's say they've had their observations, they've done their test now, so they found out, okay, yeah, so this is indeed an attentional problem. Like the other foundational skills are fine, so maybe what's one simple thing that, I can do right now with my child at home?
So many things, right? So other things are fine. Is the executive function, is it? Yeah. Okay, then you got to get organized. So you have to really break down what is this conductor supposed to do, right? So you have to regulate, right? Be able to regulate yourself. And so many strategies come to mind, how you are structuring the routines in the day, your external environment. If it's cluttered, if it's busy, it's going to all come at you and take up more attention bandwidth. So where do we start? It's hard to just give one strategy.
I think one important strategy that you can use very regularly, and it can be free, right, is doing mindfulness exercises.
Yes, she's right. There is one top strategy that we can recommend. You're right,
so
Abby.
it's really like guided meditation where the child just engages in controlled breathing exercises, or even just like being very aware of their body sensations.
I actually don't like the word meditation. I think people think it's religious. I feel like there's a religious connotation. I'm not sure. Maybe you're the younger generation that isn't?
I mean, not for me, but I can see where that just...
Maybe for the older generation. I don't know. But so I think mindfulness is good, right? But it's the same, right? I mean, the idea is that we have clutter in the brain. We have voices, right? How can we just silence everything and go into this quiet space? And that helps the conductor to work.
Yeah, and I think based on, a student perspective, let's say, you are in the middle of doing your homework, right? And sudden thoughts, these sudden impulsive thoughts come into your mind, like, what am I going to have for breakfast tomorrow? What am I going to play after doing homework? So all these thoughts come into your mind, and it's sometimes unavoidable, right? Because you do have a lot of noises around you. So the point is that when you practice mindfulness, you are more aware of all these external things coming into your mind. So the key thing is to be able to come back to the task on your own without having someone nag at you, prompt you back to the task.
Yeah, that's such a good example. I was just going to say it reminds me of my daughter. So one time, and this is real, right? I mean, in her science open-ended question, I was marking for her practice. I mean, she had her PSLE last year. And smack in the middle of a sentence, there was the word Netflix. It's real. I mean, it's shocking, right? So you see the child, the girl, sitting there as if, carefully and attentively doing that, her work, right, to answer that practice paper. But from the question, that she's gone off some space, exactly like what you mentioned, right? You have all these voices coming at you, and for her, probably Netflix come into her mind. And she actually penned the word. So the issue is that when that happens, if you practice mindfulness, I guess, with what you were saying, you have a greater ability to catch yourself and bring you back to be on task. Yeah, great example. So yes, one top strategy.
Yeah, I think even adults should do it, right?
Yeah, we should do it as a family.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we use breathing. I think one point to note, right? Because once we go into like the meditation kind of big word, right? It's like mind control. So it's not really that. It's really just being in the present, isn't it? So for the child, being in the present is a hard concept. It's very abstract. What do you mean being in the present? I am in the present. So I think focusing on the very simple task like breathing, that helps them. It's more concrete. So rather than kind of silencing your mind or emptying your mind, you're focusing on a very mundane, very boring, but ongoing task, which is your own breathing in and breathing out. Yeah, and I think that process of being able to focus on something small and then stretch that focus, because typically after 5 seconds the kids say, oh, I can't focus anymore, right? Or
I'm bored,
they start to squirm, right? Because they're on to something else. So but if you keep doing that and stretch that muscle, right? So you're really building the stamina of that conductor to stay on task, isn't it?
Right. I think like you mentioned, it can be helpful for family members to
Do it together.
do it together, right? Because then the child can feel like, okay, maybe I'm bored, but I'm not the only
Yeah.
one who's bored. So
Yeah.
And it's great bonding, isn't it?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Okay,
A good,
so
helpful brain task.
so we mentioned last week about the external environment. So decluttering, that is one other strategy. Any other strategies you can think of?
Routines, I think is a big deal. I think if you can predict what's coming up, you are used to that. That just exhausts you less. One less thing to think about, right? And you are used to doing that, so you get into the momentum of doing things as well. Rather than pushing things off or just not being organized.
Maybe but even having physical reminders, timer, or
Yeah,
having your
timer is a
schedule
great-
right in front of you, and then being able to check it off your list. I think that will help you to stay on task towards the very end of the day as well.
I think a visual timer is very useful, especially for a younger child, right? Something that's quite visual too, because some kids don't have a sense of time, right? I mean, they spend like already half an hour and they think it's just 5 minutes. So how do you instill that sense of time, right? Because so much about focus is being on task and on time, right? You can be on task, but hey, you cannot take 5 hours to do something which should be done in 1 hour, right? Or half an hour.
So we have mindfulness, we have
Decluttering your surroundings.
curating your environment, we've
Having
got
routines, they are really important.
and
A visual timer.
visual
Yeah.
timer, yes, visual
Timing.
cues, yes.
Yeah, helping kids develop a sense of time. Great.
So, maybe try some of these out, see if they can help, and, we can go from there, right?
Yeah, and of course, train the weaknesses.
Oh, yes, of course,
Right,
yeah.
so if we know that there's this auditory processing or motor or all that, we can have brain training exercises, that can be targeted.
Okay, so I think that's all the time we have for questions today. Thank you very much to parents for sending in their questions. If any listeners have any of their own questions or just want to find out more about BrainFit, where can they go?
You can visit us at our website or follow us on our socials like Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook.
Right. So once again, thank you very much for listening, and join us next time in our quest to build the
Best
learning
Brain. Bye.